delighted to introduce our panelists. So I would like to, if, when I call your name out, if you just pop your hand up, then everyone can see who you are. So I'm delighted to say that we have Dr. Sachiko Shuing, who is the co-chairwoman of FEDMA and European Privacy Officer at Axiom. We also have Christy Chon Flynn, who is the Data Protection Officer and Senior Director for Privacy, Safety, and Security Engineering at Google. Gosh, that's a big title. We have Rena Shainski, who is the Chairwoman and Co-founder of Duality Technologies. And we have Jade Nestor, who is the Director and Head of Data Public Policy for Europe at TikTok. So an amazing array of speakers today. So just to briefly introduce our topic, privacy enhancing or enabling technologies in the AdTech world. As we know, AdTech is an increasingly challenging place for businesses to operate. We're with the removal of first-party cookies, with the increasing restrictions on how we can actually operate in the ad tech space, things are very, very difficult. And in fact, it's quite difficult to stay within compliance and within the law. And we've also had quite a few interesting decisions recently. So I'm just going to go through three of those decisions briefly. The first one was really in relation to the principle of minimization limits that personal data can be used for targeted advertising. So this was the CJEU, and it was in relation to Meta. So the CJEU had been called upon to assess whether the GDPR imposes limits on Meta's platforms on the use of personal data collected outside of the network for advertising purposes. And they said that the storage of personal data of the users of a social network platform for an unlimited period for the purposes of target advertising must be considered to be a disproportionate interference in the rights guaranteed to those users by the GDPR, and it's incompatible in particular with the rules on storage limitation under the GDPR. So basically it was saying that not all data can be used for the purposes of personalized advertising, only some of it potentially can. So it was, again, a sort of a narrowing in that space. Query whether that's a very fact-specific decision. But in any event, it came from the CJEU, which is quite important. The other decision that was really interesting recently is in relation to legitimate interests. And again, that one, the court ruled that the Royal Dutch Lawn Tennis Federation who had asserted that commercial interests, the court rather, had decided that commercial interests could never be construed as legitimate interests, was actually overruled. It was fantastic. So we actually do have the ability to process data for personalized advertising as a legitimate interest. So it comes with some restrictions and so on and so forth, but actually legitimate interests, the commercial purposes basically is a legitimate interest underneath the GDPR, which is again super, super helpful. And then the third case that has been quite influential has been the case in relation to the IAB. So in the IAB, the CJEU established that while the TC string is personal data, and that's the string of data which includes all the preferences of the individuals, that it is personal data, and indeed the IAB Europe is a controller when recording consent. However, the IAB are not a controller for subsequent data processing, which was very, very helpful. And I think everyone is happy to have that clarification there, and the limits on those restrictions are increasingly clear. But what has this all got to do with pets? Ultimately, I think the answer in relation to pets is that pets are a way for us to address some of these legal and regulatory requirements through technical mechanisms. And there's different types of pets. There's pets that are cryptographic tools, such as homomorphic encryption and secure multi-party computation. There's pets that operate like distributed analytical tools, such as federated learning, where data is processed at the source. And there's also pets that can achieve pseudonymization and anonymization of data. Obviously, if data can be anonymized, then actually there is no personal data processing in the concept of the GDPR and data protection regulation. And if it's pseudonymized, then it is still subject to, obviously, the data protection legislation, but it is better protected. So the pets piece comes in lots of different forms. Each of them has their pluses and minuses in terms of their ability to be effective. With anonymized data, it's great in terms of high protection, but it can also mean that the data is less easy to use or less effective. And if you're talking about things like synthetic data, then it's created data, it's fake data. Great for testing, but maybe not so great in terms of live situations. So each of them comes with their own challenges, including if you're using homomorphic encryption, for example, you actually have to implement the software solution. It's not something that is technology neutral, but it can help enormously in terms of both protecting the confidentiality of the data and the outcomes as well. So lots of interesting things that pets can do to help organizations to demonstrate that they're complying with their data protection obligations in the ad tech space. And the opportunity to use them more is very much what we'd like to explore a little bit more today. But to help us with that discussion, I would like to actually turn over to our experts. So if I can just find my piece of paper here. Here we go. Sachiko, I wanted to start with you, if you don't mind. I've talked just broadly about ad tech. Obviously, it hardly existed a couple of decades ago when I was starting out in this space, but it's a very big thing now. But ad tech encompasses a broad range of advertising technologies. Could you just talk to us a little bit about the different types of ad tech and why it is important to understand those different types?
Thank you so much, Vivian. Yes, indeed, ad tech is huge. And what I would like to do, while it is really difficult to categorize, I think you can really broadly segment ad tech into like 3 categories. Category 1, very easily, search engine advertising. So we have Google here, you actually type in something and then underneath it, there'll be all the results, the result page. And obviously to market there is very important, but that is one type of ad tech. The other type is the so-called advertising in closed ecosystem. So here I want you to think about like, social medias, publishers, big platforms. And also in the past couple of years, there's this new type of ad tech that is called a retail media network. And that is where all the supermarkets and online shops and so on are actually providing advertising services. Now, these three types of closed ecosystem ad tech, so to say, have got one thing in common, and that is that these companies are actually allowing brands to advertise to their own customers. So in that example of retail media network, say a supermarket, say Tesco's or whatever, they have apps, websites, and also they can allow people to do brands, chocolate bars or whatever, to be advertised in store to their loyalty card members. So that is really the so-called closed ecosystem. And then the third category is ad in the open ecosystem. And I think that's the topic that privacy professionals have been debating a lot already for a decade. That's where RTBs and programmatic advertising and so on comes in. Just a small recap, programmatic advertising is, if you want, from my perspective, it really is an automated auctioning of ad spaces, and that in a split second. So it is really, really, really highly interesting. However, one thing we have to remember: all 3 categories of ad tech is very interesting, and it has been growing. It's still growing pretty much exponentially. Why? I think one of the very important reasons is because companies can buy ads in small quantities, which means the cost is not prohibitive. That opens up the possibilities to small and medium-sized enterprises, even startups, to actually advertise and tell the people these are the products that we have, which is great because in real terms, small, medium-sized enterprises really are the economical background of our society. And I don't know, Vivian, let me also just drop one comment about the Draghi report, because I think it is really, really relevant here. So there is this economist called Mario Draghi. Perhaps he's better known for being the previous Italian prime minister and also being the ex-president of European Central Bank. But in any case, Mr. Draghi came up with the report to find out, why isn't Europe doing that great? Can't Europe be more competitive? What are the challenges? And in this report, he basically says, a lot about, the energy prices being so high and things like that. But one of the key points that he addresses there in his report is that Europe may be overregulated. And of course, he called out the GDPR in his report, basically saying two key things. Thing one, he says GDPR is so fragmented because of the delegated act, where in certain areas of the GDPR, every member state can actually come up with their own specification. He even uses the word gold plating, making the requirement even tougher. Also, the inconsistent enforcement in the different European countries is contributing to fragmentation. And also, he says the price of compliance is so high. He says, €500,000 is what an SME should expect as a cost of compliance. So what does that mean? Most tech companies and most startups, they are small, they are medium-sized perhaps, so they cannot compete on the international arena. And noticing that these are the fundamental problems of European economy, the new commission, von der Leyen too, said that she is going to, or they are going to tackle it as a matter of priority, which I think is really great. It really, the core of the report really was about hitting the right balance. And maybe I need to bring that discussion back to the pet, because this call is about pet. Now, I think it is really important to understand that GDPR supports pet in a way that I also read the CIPL report on pet, and it talks of data minimization principle, being spot on when applying a pet. But I think fundamentally, GDPR is a risk-based law. It takes a risk-based approach. And what do pets do? They anonymize, they pseudonymize, they encrypt. So it is actually really providing that safeguard that GDPR sees as minimizing the level of the risk. So, for instance, in Article 6.4, where the GDPR discusses the possibility of changing the processing purposes from one to the other, 6.4e actually mentions pseudonymization, hence the use of pet, as being an example of the safeguard. A little bit more about tech now in AdTech, and then I'll be handing that over back to you, to Vivian. But I think it is also really exciting to see how pet is making its way through in the AdTech field. I tend to categorize it in two different categories once again. I like compartmentalizing things, it seems like. So the first type is the pet used in the internal ecosystem of a company. Technically speaking, you might say then it actually is not an AdTech, it's a MarTech, but that's detail, right? Companies internally have been trying to actually look at their data asset, and marketeers actually want to consolidate all the customer data into like one platform. So, you have like descriptors of the persons, the behaviors of your customers, transactional information and so on. It is this big trend to actually consolidate all these. we use the phrase break the silos and put it all onto a cloud on a customer data platform, CDPs. And what we are actually seeing there is that because the purpose of a CDP, one of the purposes at least, is to actually gain knowledge about about their customers, but at the same time, data miners don't need to know that this record actually belongs to Christy or Jade or Aiden. So what do? Put it in the pet, replace identities. Step 2, do they really have to, do they really have to actually study it in a raw state, considering the fact that all you are doing is brainstorming? So again, put it in the pet. Chuck noise in. Sorry, this is a wrong expression for mathematicians. We should really call it differential privacy, right? Use differential privacy and then reduce the risk. You don't know which data is real, which data is not real. If you really want your data miners to be creative, then what you can do is with that differential privacy treated data set, put through another round of PET, use that to actually create the synthetic data, which Vivian mentioned at the very beginning. So that's internal. External, whenever we share data, we try to use PETs. There's this one way to actually put the third party in between the data sharing two companies. They are often referred to as trusted third parties. Sometimes you actually use the data clean room, and I think Arena would be speaking much more about it because she's the specialist. That's one way. The other way is, Simple Paper also talks about it, multi-party computation, when you do collaborative analysis and things like that. A very popular way of actually using this in the AdTech field is indeed this secret sharing or secure sharing, where everybody just gets a small compartment of data. So one company in itself cannot find, reveal the identity of the person. You need to actually have a couple of companies get together, share the information to reveal that. So that was when sharing data between two companies. The second type is actually when sharing the data between two companies, but in a very specific context, namely browsers sharing information, data with the advertisers. You heard it, I think you actually feel it, Christy. I am looking at your direction. The second part of that, an example of that is, for instance, Google's privacy sandbox. So I think that with this, I'll pass the microphone back to Vivian and/or Christy.
Thanks very much, Sachiko. So thanks for clarifying, 3 different types of ad tech. I like your focus on the different types of ad tech enable all sizes of organization to access the ad tech model so that they can actually see a return on their investment in relation to advertising, that they can ensure that their advertising is actually relevant to the individual as well. Which is super important. And I think I also took away from that different types of pets are suitable for different types of ad tech purposes, whether it's internal or external, depending on what you're trying to achieve, whether it's obfuscating the data or securing the data, or ways of sharing the data in different ways. So a different pet for a different circumstance. It isn't a one size fits all. So that's been really helpful. Thank you so much. But I think you've lined it up there for Christy. We know that Google has a privacy sandbox initiative, but I wonder if you could also talk to us, Christy, a little bit about other ways in which Google is using pets in its environment, please. Over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Vivian. Nice to see everyone here, and I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm Christy, and in addition to serving as Google's data protection officer, I also lead the Central Privacy Engineering Organization. And why I mention this is because a large portion of the foundational privacy enhancing technologies are built directly by the team that that I sit in. And as Vivian mentioned, and Sachiko as well, there are many, many different use cases and applications around privacy enhancing technologies. And I think it's important to think about how do we invest in and learn about the foundational privacy enhancing technology, and then talk a little bit about how we are applying this in the world of AdTech. So privacy enhancing technologies, I mean, Google has been using it for a while. One of the examples that I can share is and illustrating sort of how long this has been in practice is, for example, using differential privacy, we are able to surface sort of the times where restaurants are busy or the busiest, or when it's not. We even used differential privacy in COVID mobility report to be able to share pertinent information for policymakers while still preserving privacy. Another example that was talked about, federated learning. Again, it was invented in Google in 2016, and we're able to use these privacy enhancing technologies for live captions. Lastly, for the broader application, I think there was a mention of homomorphic encryption. Fully homomorphic encryption has been used in Gmail spam detection and making sure that we're able to protect spam while protecting the privacy. So those are sort of the broad historical application, and we are continuing to learn and do a lot of research and investment in the privacy enhancing technology space. My team is really looking to think about how can we continue to invest in the foundational technologies that can be adopted across the various different Google products, but also may be made available through, let's say, to the developer ecosystem through open source, or through, I think, Sandbox initiative that was mentioned before, as well as how do we integrate the privacy enhancing technologies in some of our products that, for example, businesses can use, whether through our ads organization or whether through cloud. And so I think I want to make sure that we touch on this broad spectrum of work, critical work that's happening in and around the privacy enhancing technology space. And I think one other point that I want to make is, pets, it's not the panacea. Like, we have to talk and think through the trade-offs, right? What is the use case? What pet is appropriate for which use case and in which stage of the data processing. So Chico mentioned that there are internal use cases and external use cases, but there are also considerations that we need to think through. For example, if you are applying a certain pet, what is the implication to the actual product utility? What is the implication to speed of processing? And what about compute and cost? And so I think having a framework to think through what are the considerations and trade-offs and what pet is most appropriate for what use case, and perhaps even combinations of pets that can be applied in order to ensure that the product and the service and the utility is really amazing, while we protect the privacy protections as well. So, going to the digital advertising aspect, it's been long powered by innovative new technologies to enable companies to make the most of commercial opportunities online and take advantage of the natural benefits that digital has to offer. And we can imagine that this type of data collection and user level cross-site tracking also includes a lot of privacy challenges, which is being scrutinized by many around the world. And that's why Google is investing and researching and spending a lot of time thinking about this, as well as thinking about partnering across the industry to think through how we can improve and enhance the status quo practices by leveraging innovative technologies that take advantage of the new and changing privacy-enhancing technology solutions that offer both privacy and utility benefits. So one example is trusted execution environments and confidential computing. You heard this before, and I'll sort of take it to how we are integrating this into our product and the use cases. More than ever, first-party data is really critical for businesses to understand the impact of the campaigns and how to optimize the marketing strategies. And today, sharing and using that data with others to achieve, your goals can be complex. While we have ensured that we are meeting privacy requirements. So confidential computing is going to play a significant role. Just to reiterate, confidential computing uses a trusted execution environment to isolate data processing, to prevent unauthorized access, and it comes with technical guarantees that data is used as intended. So in September 2024, we announced confidential matching, bringing confidential computing technology to our ads measurement and audience solutions. This adds additional protections to the underlying technology, so businesses of all sizes can use their first-party data in new privacy-centric ways in Google Ads with technical assurance on who has access to the data and how it's used. Transparency is critical and a top reason why we are launching Confidential Match. And it's a signature feature, which is the option to receive verifiable proof and have confidence that your data is only used for the purposes you see as fit and not accessed by anyone else. So that's one application and use case. And as mentioned before, our Privacy Sandbox initiative aims to build privacy preserving, private and secure web by developing new digital advertising tools to protect privacy and prevent covert tracking, and while supporting a competitive ad-funded web. The key goals for our Privacy Sandbox are, one, to build new technology to keep your information private. Number two, to make sure that we're enabling publishers and developers to keep online content free, and also to ensure that there's space for collaboration with the industry to bring new and also bring and build new internet privacy standards. And throughout the process, we've received feedback from a wide variety of stakeholders, including publishers, web developers, and standards group, civil society regulators, and really the ecosystem. And these feedback, it's incredible, is really helping us to craft solutions that aim to support a competitive and thriving marketplace that also works for publishers and advertisers. And we need to think about how do we continue to encourage the adoption of privacy enhancing technologies. And so with that, I know Rena and I had a lot of conversations sort of going into the technical depths of a lot of these specific technologies, but maybe I can turn it to Rena to go a little bit deeper into the topic.
Thanks very much, Christy. That was super helpful and very interesting to hear about the confidential matching opportunity, as firms are, as you quite rightly state, increasingly dependent on first-party data, as there isn't much else to use. But that does need to be protected. There needs to be confidentiality, security, and confidence that your data will remain your data in that space, while nonetheless it's so essential to be able to share it in order to derive the insights. And I think, again, some very useful comments there around, different pets are suitable for different purposes. And we need to be thinking also about the technology solutions and their impact on utility, speed, compute, and cost. So very well expressed. Thank you so much. But Rena, you seem to know an awful lot about data clean rooms and the way forward there. So I invite you now to make some comments, please.
Thank you. And I will first say a few words maybe about the broader scope of pets, and then specifically about data clean rooms, because I believe they are most relevant in the AdTech context, actually. And so Duality has been enabling solutions using pets, and we provide a platform to enable organizations to collaborate on sensitive data. And this happens across various industry sectors, such as healthcare, financial services. And the platform includes a number of pets, and the names were mentioned already. The most maybe popular or most practical today, such as fully homomorphic encryption, federated learning, multi-party computation, trusted execution environment. So the platform encompasses several pets, and we add as we see the need in solutions to include additional ones. And often they are actually playing together. So they can be combined to deliver the correct solutions to protect to protect the data while being used, and also depending on the customer's required level of security. And I actually, just before diving into data clean rooms, I think it's important to mention that pets often are coming to solve challenges specifically around data in use. So because data in transit and data at rest have already good established solutions with standard cryptographic tools, but data in use remains a challenge, and also a regulatory challenge, but also protecting IP, protecting models. So there are a number of challenges involved. And also the word was mentioned, collaborative analysis, collaborative use. So when these two come together, when you need to collaborate with others and you need to protect the data at the same time, that's when probably pets are most useful, most valuable, and solutions need to include them. And also was mentioned, and this is also our experience, that just saying that you use some technology is not sufficient to say that your solution is compliant or is protecting. It also depends how you use it, how it's configured, how it's put together, and that's also very, very important. So data clean rooms, it's a kind of term that is being used in the industry. And actually, recently, there was an FTC's blog saying the fact that if it's called clean room doesn't mean it's clean necessarily. So, and that you shouldn't be judging the book by its cover. Okay. And I think there is a really good point there, that the intent, of course, is very good, is to allow parties, and in the context of advertising industry, to collaborate on their first party data, to allow them to collaborate, but in a very compliant way. So the data of each party, the sensitive, is not exposed to the other party. And that it's being used according to what they allow to use. Usually, it's to do collaborative analytics. To do collaborative analytics in the context of advertising industry, it's often about some impact measurements, meaning that one party is maybe doing a campaign and wants to see, but the impact happens with the other party. And Sachiko mentioned e-commerce is very, very relevant to this example. So there is advertiser maybe of a CPG product, but the actual sales happening with the retailer, and they want to see whether a specific campaign that they ran actually made the impact they expected. So they would like to somehow combine this information that they have. So let's say they were targeting particular demographics, and they want to know if that demographics actually was purchasing the product. So the retailer, because of loyalty clubs, etc., might have demographic information, while the advertiser knows the campaign information. So they want to see that actually the campaign had the impact they intended. So they want to bring the data sets together to analyze, not to expose any individual information. They don't care if that RINA actually purchased. They want to see if the demographics that was impacted is the one they had in mind, and to see the effectiveness and so on. And this is what they would use the data clean room for. So it is important to make sure that actually the first party data that they bring in, they need to have some identifiers from the same space, so they can actually know that they can do like a joint in a way, and to intersect the data sets and to analyze. So the purpose is to come up with aggregated analytics, not to expose any individual data, but in the process, they need to do this kind of combination. So basically, I would say the bottom line is the data clean rooms can be a good solution, but especially if they are combined with additional protective technologies. And Christy was mentioning confidential computing or trusted execution environment that actually would protect the data, even in such a way that nobody, even the party that operates the service, will not be able to see the internals, and still to run the analytics and to get the insights. So the insights can be shared, but nothing that goes in actually gets exposed. The FTC paper was emphasizing that it doesn't happen by itself, meaning just dumping the data there is not the proper protection of the process, because the process is sensitive, because it involves first-party data from several parties. So by itself, it doesn't happen. It needs to be protected by some of the technologies that we mentioned, but confidential computing, sometimes even with differential privacy and so on. And after this analysis actually occurred, the data can be shared, because all it has, it's some, for example, impact analysis or impact measurements. And it might help, and it was also mentioned, if it's operated by a third party. So not the parties necessarily that actually did, because, for example, just to give an idea, that the identifiers can be tokenized. So each party could be reverse engineer it, but the third party cannot. So it's an extra protection. So basically the bottom line here, that data clean rooms, but with reinforcements, with guardrails, can actually serve the purpose, and they may tick many boxes, and if not all of them, of various regulatory requirements, but needs to be done correctly. I believe these are the key points that I wanted to mention. Yes.
Thank you very much, Rena. That was really insightful. And we couldn't possibly have a conversation about AdTech unless we talked about data clean rooms. And thank you for addressing that myth that just because it's called a data clean room doesn't necessarily mean it's clean. Actually, you need to do more to make sure that it is the confidential and secure environment that people are expecting from the clean room, because there's been a big shift outside of using data clean rooms because of those concerns. But PETs offer an opportunity to make sure the confidentiality, the security, and even the provenance of the data is protected in that data clean room, giving us hope. And also, I think you touched on that really important aspect of PETs, which is PETs are for the first time enable us to protect data in use. It's a solution for data in use. We have solutions for data at rest. But that data in use solution has been, oh my goodness, here we go, in the dark, hasn't always been with us. So PETs certainly give us an opportunity there. So thank you so much. I'd like to now call on Jade, if you don't mind. And Jade, I wonder if you could sort of take a step back and talk to us a little bit about governance strategies and how we can implement them around the use of PETs in the context of AdTech.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to build on some of the things that others have been saying, because I think there's a lot of interest in a lot of the same topic areas. But to Vivian's point, we at TikTok are approaching this as part of the overall privacy by design process, which for us means we have teams from legal and compliance and policy who are looking at GDPR compliance, but then also looking at a range of other regulations as well, as we have in Europe, like the DSA and the DMA. Increasingly, the AI Act is also on everyone's horizon. So we're doing that. And then we're not just applying the privacy enhancing technologies to AdTech. We're thinking about this in other ways as well. So expanding that privacy by design process actually and bringing in security by design. We're using PETs for data transfers, for example, as a part of our industry leading data sovereignty program that we call Project Clover. And I say industry leading because there's some novel aspects about it. And one aspect of that is novel, I think, is using differential privacy for cross-border data flows. So if you have employees and you want to limit access to data but still leverage insights, we're trying to use differential privacy for that. But the other unique aspect of this, to Vivian's point about governance, is that we have a UK-based cybersecurity company called NCC Group, which is providing not only independent oversight of all of Project Clover and of our data flows, for example, and NCC Group is also monitoring access to data, but they're also validating the PETs that we're using in the program. And so we have this layer of third-party accountability where they're helping us validate, is the approach robust enough? And I think that's going to be a challenge for all companies, because I don't think this is as simple where you'll just have a standard to follow. It's a case-by-case basis. And so that's something that we've added to the governance program. There is that third-party oversight for accountability. And we have an element of that too, I think, like others, in terms of open sourcing some of the AdTech solutions that we have. So if we look at privacy by design and PETs and AdTech, as others have mentioned, the goal has been to develop solutions to help advertisers unlock insights with their first-party data. And we're helping them analyze and learn from data while protecting inputs. And we're also using quote unquote clean rooms and then also trusted execution environments to do that. But then also multi-party computation, differential privacy, And that actually is on our Privacy Go GitHub, which our privacy engineers would be very happy if you looked at, because I think they work a lot on these different solutions. I see Christy smiling. She knows how this is. People build these things and then they're very excited that they want people to use them. So you can check it out. And there's a lot of math there too that I can't do, but is critical to making sure that this all works. So that's one aspect of it. And just back to the engineering point, I just think seeing what works, it's a process over time, and it's really interesting to watch. For us specifically, we're using the trusted execution environment, clean room, and multi-party computation solutions to do things like figuring out what they call conversion lift. So if someone looks at an ad, did they take a specific action based on a specific ad? Is one ad better than another ad? Things like that. So basically, advertisers know if they're spending their money appropriately, and I think that's just a huge challenging across advertising in general. And I think Vivian also, we'd been talking in Brussels at IAPP about just the challenges with ad tech and AI more generally. And so one of the things that I mentioned there, which isn't exactly a privacy enhancing technology, but I think is a critical thing to discuss in the context of AI and advertising, and just AI and content in general, is this question of validating the authenticity of content in this sort of content ecosystem that we're all in. And at TikTok, it's particularly interesting because we have advertisers, of course, who make ads, but the trick really is to make an ad that looks like a TikTok. That's what people like. And so for our general users, we rolled out labeling on just any sort of AIGC that the users are putting out there. And I think about 37 million of the users have added labels to say that the content that they put out is AI generated. But then at the same time, we're also building tools to help remove the barrier to entry for creativity for advertisers. And these are AI tools where you can do things like change the language in the ad so that you can speak, the actor can speak a language that they don't actually speak. Things like that, particularly helpful to small and medium-sized businesses. But with that, there's also a sense that you need to tell people if that's real or not. And then going forward, how do you tell if that's real? And so one of the things that we've been doing is expanding auto labeling on our AI generated content. And we're part of this group called the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, called C2PA. What we'll be doing is attaching content credentials, which is basically metadata to content, which we can use to instantly recognize and label AIGC. So we had initially that obligation for users to label, but now we'll be automatically labeling content. So over the coming months, TikTok will start attaching these content credentials to TikTok content that has some significant altering with AI. And that remains on the content even if it's downloaded. So if it spreads across the internet, it will still have that metadata attached to it. And people can use a tool called C2PA Verify to help identify if this was made on TikTok or not. And you can tell, was it edited? Where was it made? So it has that element almost of like the blockchain sort of element where you could tell if something's been modified or not, and it travels with the data. And we're the first video sharing platform to actually put the content credentials into practice. So it's going to be a gradual rollout, but I think that's going to be really interesting technical process, to watch in the future as we apply AI and pets and all of these different tools to this ad tech ecosystem.
Super. Thank you very much, Jade. It was useful to hear about the NCC governance validation, and you raised a very good point there as well around the complexity of governance frameworks. It's not a one-size-fits-all. So much of it depends on the particular facts and the circumstances. And yet that external validation of a governance process, I think, is hugely important because it gives a level of assurance as well. Now, we do have some time for some questions, and I have some questions in our box. So I am going to just ask one of the questions to our panelists, and whoever would like to have a go at answering this one. This is a wicked question. Oh, hang on a second, I just lost it. Where was it? Here we go. Oh heavens, it's moved again. do you see a way in which pets can assist in supporting legitimate interest arguments for some personalized advertising purposes where consent might otherwise be required? So I think what they're asking is can the pet help you get over the consent piece? Are you seeing anything out there, panelists, that could help bridge that particular requirement? Anyone would like to have a go at that?
Sure, I can go for that.
Such a go.
So there are certain parts of data processing that must be based on consent. That is not only because of the GDPR. I mean, I'm here only talking about Europe for the clarity of the discussion. But you also need to take e-privacy directive into consideration. So where, for instance, you are storing data on the device, or when you're reading information from the device, that no matter what you do, no matter what pet you do, you need to live with it. You do need a consent. However, if you are talking about, analytical activities and so on, I think when the legitimate interest assessments that you do need to carry out whenever basing your argument on legitimate interest as a legal ground, you do this balancing exercise. And because using a pet would automatically mean, providing some safeguards, which automatically, reduces the level of risk. I think it will be much more likely for whatever processing that you're trying to use legitimate interest as the legal ground to be okay, because when you do the balancing test, it's more likely to tilt in favor of the company. So that's my comment on that.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has anything that they want to add to that. If not, I have another question. It says, "Good day, esteemed panel. My question is, how can companies protect their economic interests while leveraging ads, yet also allow users to opt out of personal ads freely without cookie paywalls?" So I think there's quite a lot out there in terms of cookie paywalls, but everyone also has the ability to opt out. How do we make this commercial model work? Any thoughts from the panel?
Well,
Okay, then
I'll also try. I mean, I don't want to sort of dominate the entire opinion, but this is purely personal. It's not Axiom. It's not FedMA. This is this is something that, for instance, that cookie pledge initiative from the European Commission, which was very interesting because that came from the consumer protection side, right? They were really weary of what's that, consent fatigue. So they wanted to actually solve that problem from a slightly different angle, but I think it is really difficult to actually accomplish that task. I think the key to this all really is a solid, robust dialogue between companies that are actually in the business itself, to actually discuss the matter, share the insights with the legislators and the regulators to come up with a solution that would be beneficial to all parties. But at current, it is really, really difficult. There are also companies that are very innovative that are creating solutions where what you do is that you actually, as a user or consumer, choose what advertisement you want to see. So, for instance, say I just graduated college and I go through my career, and then suddenly I got pregnant. Me not anymore, I'm too old for that. But let's say I was that age. And then I'm really interested about, some pregnancy information, and what are good nutrition, what vitamins are good, and what are all these things that are on the market. Then what I do is I actually use that software or an interface or an app to say, hey, right now I'm very interested in any and every ad that has got to do with pregnancy. then companies can actually purposefully send such information to those individuals. I think that sort of an initiatives are also, popping up here and there. There are many, many creative solutions. So I think we should really continue to explore these. And I think this is also meant by Draghi as, innovation, creativity.
Super. Thank you so much, Sachiko. That's terrific. I'm afraid we don't have time for any more questions, but I think we've learned an awful lot today in our webinar. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Sachiko, Christy, Rena, and Jade for sharing your insights and your expertise with us. Certainly, I think the innovation is the name of the game. I think we know that pets have an excellent future in AdTech. I think AdTech as well, part of what those questions we're getting to is, how do we get people comfortable with ad tech, see the return on investment for advertisers? I think a lot of it boils down to trust and transparency. So to echo some of the points that were made by our speakers today, it's about sharing how does it work? What is it intended to do? And are the outcomes what are expected by the individuals? And then we can get better engagement. And the other question is I loved your last comment there, Sachiko, just around maybe we turn it on its head and people opt in to certain types of communications and messages and information because it's something that they're interested in at that time, but then they can readily opt out of it when it is no longer relevant to them, or they decide not to pursue that sport or activity or whatever it is anymore. But pets, there's certainly a lot of variety in pets. Pets can help enormously with confidentiality, with security, with data sharing, with enabling insights that we didn't think we would be able to have before. But there are also limitations into what it can achieve. It is not a magic wand. It doesn't remove the obligations with regard to data protection compliance, but it certainly helps to lower the risks and the legal liability associated with it. And it gives both consumers and those who are marketing and those in the middle the confidence to engage in a safer and secure way and to know that they are managing the data effectively. So thank you very much to our outstanding panelists, as I said, to Sachiko, Christy, Rena, and Jade for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. And thank you to our audience for listening and for your excellent questions. We look forward to seeing you and hearing from you at another SIPL event soon. Thank you from me. Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.